Hello to everyone. My name is Juan Echanove, and I'm the Senior Director for Food and Water Systems at CARE. And today, I'm going to briefly talk to you about the upcoming food security crisis that the COVID pandemic is now triggering. I will be very brief. I will only refer to the main headlines in relation to this crisis, and in further videos, we will elaborate more in terms of what CARE response to this crisis is so far and will be. So I guess that many of you have probably already read in the news the worms that the UN and many others and the media, etc., are making in regarding to the world on the brink of a hunger pandemic, right, as a result of the COVID crisis. And UN, United Nations organizations are talking about increase in numbers of hundreds of millions of new people under poverty line because of this hunger pandemic, and also the number of people suffering hunger, facing acute hunger, to increase by millions, right? So I think it's probably worth starting this by taking a closing look to the root causes of this potential hunger pandemic, because actually they are multiple, and they really require a thorough analysis. So what you see here is a basic scheme of a food system, right? Including the resources that the farmer needs to produce, to farm, including seeds, etc. The farmer, the market, and the consumers, right? And also you have those arrows there referring to the main components of what we call food security. So on the one hand, it's the availability of the food, basically the supply. So is food available? Are farmers producing food? So, food is available in the markets. And the accessibility aspect of it, the demand. Okay, there might be food available, but can actually people afford to pay for it? And also the aspect on utilization, meaning the quality, how nutritious is the food that is available. So as we all know, this started as a health crisis in China, right? Then the epicenter of the pandemic moved to Europe, and then to the US. And the governments in the global north, the government in all these parts of the world responded to this health crisis with social distance measures, right? Including movement restrictions and lockdowns, aiming to slow the spread of the pandemic. But this very soon triggered a huge economic crisis in the global north. The worst, according to the International Monetary Fund, the worst since the crisis in 1929. And amongst many impacts, this economic crisis is also reducing the demand of commodities from the global south to the global north. Things like copper or cocoa or sugarcane, etc. The countries from the global south export to the global north. Now there is less demand because of this crisis in the global north. But it's also reducing the flow of remittances by migrants in the global north, migrants from the global south living in the global north, right? Because they are losing their jobs, they cannot send money back home. And it's also reducing investments that the global north undertake in the countries in the global south. And it's also basically killing tourism in Africa, Latin America, in Asia. So in short, this crisis in the global north is now triggering an economic crisis in the global south as well. And this crisis basically means that consumers and also farmers are affected in their income and hence in their food security. They cannot buy, farmers cannot buy the seeds, the fertilizers that they need to produce because they have less income. And also consumers in countries in Africa, in Asia, Latin America, because of the crisis, they have less income to afford food. So the economic crisis in the global north has triggered a crisis in the global south that is already affecting the food security systems, right? But this is not all. There is a second set of causes of this food security crisis happening right now. Because the countries in the global south are also now imposing strict social distance measures themselves, kind of mirroring the kind of movement restrictions that have been imposed in the global north. And this is basically increasing further the disruption in the food systems in various ways, right? On the one hand, this is creating trade restrictions. So, some of the supplies that the farmers need to produce are now not available or not that easily available, like seeds, fertilizers, etc. Also, in some countries, farmers, because of the lockdown, they cannot access their farmlands. They cannot farm. So they cannot produce food. And this is happening during a time when in many parts of Asia and Africa, the harvest season is coming. So that means that there is less food available in the markets. Also because many markets are actually closed, or the food is not reaching to the markets, or the grocery stores or supermarkets that remain open. But on the other hand, many consumers in the global south, many people living in the cities in the global south, they rely on their daily income, on the daily wage, because they're part of the informal economy. They don't have formal jobs, so they really need to go out there to get the income they need to buy food. So even if groceries, supermarkets are open and they can eventually go there to buy food, they don't have the income to buy that food. So all these things are actually happen despite the fact that the pandemic has not yet impacted the global south with the same intensity as it is already affecting the global north, right? But this is already starting. And particularly in Latin America, in places like Ecuador or Brazil or Mexico, the number of COVID cases and the number of deaths caused by COVID, it's really growing exponentially in a similar way on how this has been growing already for 2 months in Europe or in the US. We don't know when COVID will get around in Africa or in South Asia, countries like India, or in Southeast Asia, right? And if that happens, we don't know how intense will it be, right? But in any case, what we know for sure is that once the pandemic will really start growing exponentially in these countries in the global south, this will add a further shock to the food systems, right? Creating a very difficult situation over a situation which is already extraordinarily complex, right? And all these pressures, and I really want to finish this presentation with a note on this, all these pressures are particularly difficult for women because they often eat last and least. And they are actually at risk of gender-based violence because of these lockdowns, because of the tension at household level. The crisis is also already affecting women's access to water, to land, to sanitation. So the food crisis, it's actually deepening the gender injustice in the global south. Thank you so much. And as I said, there will be other videos focusing on the response by CARE to this food insecurity crisis or the hunger pandemic that is now affecting the global south. Thank you so much.